Morning, folks. Welcome to your daily fireside chat at Lake Superior Art Glass. Today, Wednesday, we're going to be making a pink signature pendant. So you've seen me make a signature marble now, and this is basically the pendant version of it. It is quite a bit smaller. I have to try to plan to make like a 1.25 inch size marble or less to get all the details in there, and the pendants do end up fairly large. I keep them really flat so that they're more wearable, but to get all the detail, they just don't end up any smaller than like, 1.75 inches in diameter, maybe even 2 inches. So they're definitely a little bit bigger of a pendant compared to some of my more common ones like the image pendants. But they're really pretty. They've got a really nice statement piece. I do them both with and without opals. I've just found some people like the opals, some people don't. So I do it both ways, and the pink version is a little different. I don't do the pink version of my marbles, and what I'll do for that is actually use 24 karat gold and then put white glass behind it, because 24 karat gold by itself basically looks pink. And so that's how I'll achieve the colors today. So a little different take on that series. Just want to remind everyone about our artist relief fundraiser. So any of the local image pendants sold the month of April will be $5 from each pendant will be donated to the Artist Relief Fund of Minnesota. And so that's a fundraiser we're doing now through the end of the month. So if you've been thinking about a Lake Superior pendant or a Minnesota pendant or Sisu, any of those local images, $5 of each sale goes towards other local artists essentially. So keep that in mind. If you have pendant ideas, stuff you'd like to watch me make live as a custom piece for you, be sure to submit those ideas on our website, lakesuperiorartglass.com. And yeah, I think new sale items get announced today. I'm not sure what they are yet. I haven't talked to Jody yet this morning, but we are working on that, and we'll announce what the new sale items are today. So keep your eyes and ears peeled to Facebook and Instagram for all the latest updates there. Thank you guys again so much for the orders. Those of you who follow my personal pages may have seen I had a little incident last night. We're doing our big living room redo, and it was going so well that I just had to, throw a wrench into things. So I stepped off the little two-step step stool and stepped down onto the lamp cord, which was off of the floor because I was pulled away from the wall so I could work in that corner. And I didn't want to do that, so I instantly reacted and tried to step back up onto the step stool, but it scooted away from me as I did that, and I went keeling backwards and put my elbow through the window and broke the fall on the corner of the radiator with my back. So that was pretty interesting. Definitely felt like I was in shock for a little while. I've only had a couple other experiences where I've felt that way in the past, when I got into a car accident and when I rolled my four-wheeler. So that was a pretty scary moment, and everything's seeming okay. I got one little cut right on my elbow. That was the only cut from putting my whole elbow through a plate glass window. And my back is pretty sore, pretty scraped up and bruised, but I don't think anything too crazy that's going to be anything long term. So I'm safe, doing well, but yeah, wouldn't be a Neff Johnson project without some extra kinks in the mix. So yeah, that's what I did last night. So yeah, I'm gonna start the demo, and I'm gonna talk a little bit more today about just some of the generic things I talk about in my regular demos. I started realizing that not everyone has watched every demo, let alone watched it all the way through. And so I've been trying not to repeat myself so I don't bore folks, but then I realized there's a lot of people tuning in and out, tuning in for their first time, and they might not have heard a lot of the information I've said in previous demos. So I'm going to talk a little bit more about just the basics of what I'm doing in every demo from here forward, just so folks don't miss out on that information as well. So I'm going to start with a piece of 12mm rod. I've got it on my 8mm handle. And I'll start by heating up the end of it. I'll fume it with 24 karat gold and then dot it with white glass. When I say dotted, I'm just going to put dots of white glass on there. A really cool thing I was noticing as I was getting the iPad set up today is with this clear glass, you can see how the end is glowing as well. So that's a great example of fiber optics. It's essentially how we're getting our internet these days is through glass cables. And you can see that light transmission. And what's crazy is that it's not hot by any means, but when the light gets so bright, when this glass gets really, really molten, if you have your finger at the end of the rod here, it'll actually feel like you're getting burned, but it's like a sunburn. It's a light burn, not a heat burn. And so kind of a crazy, cool science tip or tidbit that I noticed today that I thought I should mention. Right now I am warming up my rod of glass that has my 24 karat gold on it. If you throw it into the flame too quickly, your gold just pops off, and then you spend like 10 minutes or 5 minutes searching all over your bench for this little tiny piece of gold. So I just wave it back and forth in the flame to warm it up slowly so I don't make that piece of gold jump off of there. All right. So with fuming, your flame settings are super important. It's essentially what determines how your colors turn out based on how much of each metal you lay onto the glass by fuming. So this pendant is a custom order for my aunt, Auntie Dante, Kathy Neff there. She has the largest collection of my pendants out of anyone. I think she's over 100. And she actually strings up and boxes, right now probably about, I don't know, 60% of the pendants that I make. But in the past it's been 100%. And she stickers all of our boxes for the gift boxes in the gallery, and she used to sticker all the bags. So she's been a huge behind the scenes support person throughout the years, and just getting my work out there to the public and helping out in any way she can. So this is a pendant that she does not have in her collection yet that she wanted. So for it to be a great opportunity to show you guys how I make this style of pendant. All right, so I'm building up a really nice layer of gold. So it looks like it's glowing hot. That peachish color tint that you're seeing, that's actually all 24 karat gold. And it's got a really nice sheen to it. It's kind of hard to see. It's a nice pink peachish kind of sheen. We're just gonna bake that in a little bit, make sure it's all nice and warm. And then I'll start putting dots with white glass on there, and that's gonna track the 24 karat gold onto the rod and basically define it as a pink color. So again, one of those tips that I was talking about, or pieces of information that I typically would talk about during a demo, but haven't been for a while just because I didn't want to be repeating myself. But this flame is about 4,500 degrees. It's propane and oxygen combusting just about as hot as those two gases can. The glass needs to be about 2,300 to 2,500 to really work with it, depending on how viscous you're looking to get it. But Pyrex or borosilicate glass, which is what I use, it's what we use in the entire Flameworking Studio, is it cools very quickly. And so by having a flame that's about twice as hot as the melting temperature that you're trying to achieve, it allows you to work at a pretty good pace. That way you're not waiting around forever for that glass to get hot. There's definitely still times where you do have to wait, but you don't have to wait as long. So MAPS gas is a bottled gas you can buy, kind of like the bottles of propane for silver soldering and brazing and stuff like that. And so MAPS gas does get pretty hot, but it does not get anywhere as close to as hot as burning pure oxygen and propane. And so MAPS gas works for soft glass. Some of the softer glasses, you can make beads and stuff using MAPS gas, but with Pyrex and borosilicate, you hardly get it liquid at all. It gets it warm, it gets it moving, but not liquid to the point where you can really, really manipulate that glass. Certainly not in any short amount of time. You'd be waiting a long time to get that glass moving. So now I'm melting in those white dots and burning off the fume. Anywhere that there's not a white dot, that 24 karat gold is getting burned off of the surface of the glass. And that'll leave us behind some really nice pink dots. As always, if you guys have questions, be sure to type them in. I'll try my best to answer them. There we go. Now you can see all those dots. I'm just going to shape it up a little bit here, try to get it a little bit more cylindrical. And then I'm going to coat it with black glass. Now for my pendants, I prefer to use the color Raven by Glass Alchemy. It's a really dense black that doesn't like to gray out. That's what I've got here. And again, all the blacks look the same in the rod form, but they all have very different properties. So I always label them. The same way that I sign all of my artwork, I use a titanium pen that basically inscribes a little silver signature. It leaves a little bit of titanium behind in the glass. And I use that to label all of my black rods of glass, or anything that looks black. Anything that could get confused with another color, I always write on it what color it is. And then even the little clear handle that I've got welded onto this piece, that's also labeled. So I've got all the handles for all the common colors I use that look black. I've got them all labeled. So there's never any confusion about what color is what. Because you always think you're going to remember, and you go on to some other projects for a few days and you come back to it and you're like, oh, I think this rod was jet black, but maybe it's black violet. I don't know. So you can really screw up a project by using the wrong color. In fact, we were emptying out the living room to redo it. I was looking at my glass case. Most of the only pieces I have of my own in my collection are all seconds or flaws. I've actually got a pretty nice collection of marbles that, courtesy of the TSA, they damaged about $5,000 worth of marbles in my luggage a couple of years ago. So they're beautiful marbles, but they all got little chips in them before they clang together when TSA didn't repack them how they found them. So got a nice collection of those. But anyway, what I was getting at is I came across this one marble. It was a vortex marble from probably 2010-ish, back when I still had my home studio. And it's kind of funny. I was looking at it and I was like, wow, well, that's a really crappy vortex because there's almost no clear lens to the top. It was almost all vortex. And the whole background pattern, I mistakenly used Asian black, which is one of the colors that is imported from China. And that does not hold up super well to many reheats. It tends to break down and it migrates. And so this whole feathering pattern not only was pretty much all black because the black overpowered the other color I'd put with it, but it was all textured. You just could not get that glass glossy again once it had kind of gotten worn out. And so anyway, a good reminder of why I label all of my black rods now, because things like that happen, and then you have a totally second quality marble for those hours and hours that you invested into it. All right, so I've got my black all melted in. Not seeing any bubbles that I'll need to pop, which is super exciting. So now I'm going to put a punty on the bottom side, and I'll twist up this vortex a little bit. It shouldn't need a whole lot, but a little. It typically twists a little bit as I melt in those dots, so just heat it up, and then to twist, I'll spin one hand a little faster than the other. Now I'll go back up to where the colored glass meets the clear and start gently squeezing together to expand and open up that equator. I start these just like I would make a vortex, same exact process. I haven't actually made any of these in quite some time. They're one of the series that ends up taking the back burner quite often to everything else that I'm trying to accomplish. But I thought today would be a great opportunity not only to make this one for my aunt, but to potentially do some other ones as well. So if you've watched any of my other demos, if I have a marble setup or a marble that I'm making in a vortex like this, and I have more setup, essentially the fumed area that I just made, if I have more of that than I need, I'll take it off pretty strategically and save that to use in another project, another vortex or same series item down the line. So I actually have 3 signature series setups, essentially pieces that are just like where I'm at right now, kind of ready to be turned into pendants. So I'm gonna make 3 more of those today to add to my inventory. So now I'm heating up the tip of my pattern of the vortex to bring it to a termination. So I'm twisting and removing glass to get this into a nice cone shape. So I just removed all that glass from the tip. Got a really nice cone now. And so now here's where things change. You know, if this were a vortex marble, I'd start adding my clear glass around that cone. But, you know, a lot of times people ask for vortexes and pendants, and it's really hard to do without making this really deep, chunky pendant. And I've started doing it a little bit again when I have time with my Galaxy Vortex series. But for these, I'll actually shrink it down and basically flatten out that cone and try to get it to be a nice flat pendant that's a lot more wearable. And so there again, that's why these pendants end up quite a bit bigger, is there's just so much glass to get the detail, but then to also make them flat and not super raised and chunky, you know, the glass has to go somewhere, so it gets wider. Now I'm being very specific about how and where I'm heating this glass to melt it in. If I heat the tip of my cone too much, it's going to open up that cone and the termination of my vortex kind of goes away and becomes much less defined. So I'm actually heating behind the tip of the cone and essentially just letting this glass round out. That's one of the things that comes up in our classes a lot is people say, oh, well, you know, how do I get it to do this? Or why isn't it getting smoother? And the answer is always more spinning and heating. You just got to get it hotter, because as it gets hotter, especially as it gets to the core, that heat gets to the core, and you're spinning it, that glass just wants to round out. It wants to take the shape of least resistance. So rather than forcing it, I'm just letting that glass kind of consolidate and shrink up on its own. And that's going to help keep my pattern on the inside much tighter and more crisp. And then, once I get it almost round, I can show you my shape here in just a sec, this is where I'll start actually doing a little bit of a compression technique. This is how flowers, or like my sea anemones, are put into glass. And it's a technique I learned from John Kabuki, who's world renowned for his flowers and glass. Learned from John a few different times, and it's just so cool being able to take those classes with these world renowned artists and learn these techniques and then totally apply them to your own concept. So even though I'm not making a three-dimensional flower blossoming up inside of this pendant, I'm still going to use the same principles to get my pattern kind of flattened out and condensed. So there you can see the shape I've got, almost round. And so now I'm going to start compressing. I want to make sure the tip is not too hot, so I'm heating more of the equator. I'm going to go onto my marvering pad and just kind of gently start tapping. If you get too aggressive, you're just going to flatten out the very bottom. And then essentially we want to chill the bottom and flatten out the sides, or that equator area of the marble. Okay, so we're just doing it a little bit at a time. Nothing too crazy all at once. A lot of times folks ask, especially when we were talking earlier about how the glass rod was glowing essentially, why don't I wear gloves and aren't my hands hot? And the reason is that glass is actually an insulator, not a conductor. So even though the glass is 2,000 degrees on the end, I can touch a few inches away without getting burned because that glass doesn't transfer the heat. Just adding a little dot of black glass over my termination. You usually end up with a little bit of a hole essentially in the back where your pattern came to that termination. So we want to block that up so we don't have a clear spot in the center of our pendant. And get everything melted in, and then I'll compress it a few more times. The ability to rotate your hands nice and consistently is absolutely crucial to blowing glass, especially flame working like this, where you have to have both hands working in unison to control a piece. And so when I was first learning, I was in high school, I was 17 and had this apprenticeship, and my senior year of high school, I was really into not having homework. I finally had a study hall. I'd always taken extra music classes throughout high school that's what I wanted to do, and so I literally never had a study hall, I don't think, until my senior year. Maybe I had one semester at some point in like 9th grade, but so I would like crank out my homework in that study hall to really try not to ever have to do any work outside of school. But I was also trying to use my time efficiently, I guess is the point. And so in class, when teachers would be lecturing, I would already be starting the assignment, trying to get it done, stuff like that. And I remember sitting in history class in 11th grade, and I didn't have any homework I could be working on. And I was like, man, I wish there was something I could be doing to get better at glass blowing. But all I could really think of is, reading a book about glass blowing, which the teacher would definitely catch me doing. And I was like, well, can't do that. I'll get in trouble for that. So I don't know what else I can do. And then it finally dawned on me. I was like, well, I could practice my spinning. So I would just take pens and pencils and spin them in my hand during lecture classes to build up that muscle memory, because it's so crucial to have a nice even rotation that's really driven by muscle memory and not something you have to actively think about. So that's how I practice my rotation. So it's a great way for folks at home, if they want to do a little prep before they come in for their class, is just spin some pens and pencils when you're watching Netflix or whatever. Get the feel of that. So right now I'm doing more of that compression technique. I hold it at a downward angle to let some of that glass from the outer rim move down towards the bottom. And then I give it a gentle compression. Essentially I'm just trying to migrate that whole pattern, the whole black glass, onto the back, which you can see I've achieved now. There's a quick glimpse on the inside. You can see some of that swirl there. Okay, so now I'm ready to put a punty on the backside and start finishing up this pendant. Super important that that punty is nice and centered. I'm going to use my Kung Fu move that I think you guys saw me do yesterday, and maybe a couple other times too, to widen and flatten this pendant even more. And if that punty isn't centered, when you use centrifugal force to stretch it out and flare it, any off-axis or asymmetry is going to get accented. There's what's left of my rod. I used about, where is that other piece? Yeah, I used almost 4 inches of 12 millimeter rod in this, so it's got a lot of glass. Again, it makes it a bigger pendant, but it's a statement piece. It's not designed to be dainty by any means. Now I'm just heating up the lens, waiting for that to kind of start rounding out on its own. And I'll use that Kung Fu move here in a couple minutes, or about a minute or so, to really widen it a little bit more and get it even flatter. I'll give you guys a quick glimpse at the profile now, how thick that is. It's probably about 1/2 inch to 5/8. Somewhere in there, thick, and probably 1 3/4 in diameter. So now I'm going to heat up the rim, or if we think of this like a tire, the tread of the tire. Make sure my punty is cool. I don't want that moving on me. And do the Kung Fu move. You got your heat right in there. It doesn't take a whole lot. So I just decreased that to probably more like a 3/8 inch thick pendant and probably more like a 2 inch diameter. Just by that centrifugal force move. Really, really helpful. This one's got a nice termination to that center of the vortex too. All right, so lastly, we'll put the loop on here. Actually, no. My aunt wanted the droplet shape, so actually I need to stick a punty on the bottom, and then we'll stretch out some of the glass on the bottom half to give it more of a reverse droplet shape. I call it a teardrop, but water droplets are typically bigger on the bottom, but you get the idea. This will be kind of opposite of that. I guess that's another one of those style things that I started doing a long time ago. I saw everyone doing droplet shaped pendants with bulbous bottoms, and at one point I had, stretched something out and realized, oh, well, what if I make that the bottom? What if I make the pointed end the bottom? And so that's just kind of a style I've stuck with for probably about 13 years now, I bet. Just flattening out the backside there where I removed my punty. Now I'll stick my black glass on that the loop will be made from, but I'm not going to make the loop out of it right away. We'll let that cool down for a minute. And then I'll heat up the bottom half of the pendant and give it a stretch to get that shape I'm going for. Alright. A lot of times I'll kind of use gravity to help keep things nice and linear. The tip was a little too hot there, so I had to blow on it and cool it. I'm just going to add some more heat. Didn't get quite as much movement as I was hoping for. Go. Let's get in there. Thanks, Katie. Glad you like it. Alright, so I'm going to leave it there. I really like that taper. Now I'll do the loop, and then I'll get the final point after the loop. My aunt asked if I could remind her what the colored glass was used to make it pink, or if it's just the oxidizing process. The pink is from Fuming 24 karat gold, so that's where I melted the piece of gold in the flame, and it vaporized and stuck to the clear glass. And then I trapped the gold in there by adding dots of white glass. So the white really helps that gold show up as pink. For my normal signature series, I use clear dots of glass with the addition of fine silver, and that gets me more of the teals and greens and olive tones. Always using gravity as much as possible. So I was kind of hanging things down there, letting gravity pull things into a line. Now I need to adjust my loop just a little bit. It's a touch off center. So I'm going to heat up the base of the loop and scoot it over a little bit with this reamer. And there's all kinds of adages about different craftspeople and tradespeople about, oh, well, you know, a good carpenter, you can tell if it's a good carpenter because he can hide his mistakes. There's definitely a lot of that in every trade. You know, and a lot of times it's not even hiding mistakes, it's just finding little tricks like that to help make something look perfect that was not quite up to that perfect standard. So loops are a really big stickler for me. As I've said before, a lot of my apprentices, you know, oftentimes even years later, they'll say, wow, you know, I learned a lot during my apprenticeship, but the most valuable thing I learned how to make is how to make consistent, really clean loops. And that's just something I've always strived for with my jewelry, because I really want to make sure everything I'm making is very wearable and people enjoy it and it feels good. You know, a lot of times people touch things that they're wearing. So I want it to lay nice. I want that loop to be nice and centered and, you know, really even thickness so it's strong. So really take a lot of pride in my loops. All right, so pendant's good. We just got to pull it off of there. No, Stan, I didn't fix the window yet. I broke that at about, I don't know, 10 o'clock last night, maybe, something like that. So that one's going to be waiting a while. We'll see when I can get a pane of glass to replace that. There's a storm window on the outside, so I'm not too worried about it. Probably, as far as that goes, maybe I'll just wait till next fall. If it weren't during quarantine, I probably would, but since I have a little extra time right now, any project like that should be done now, not put off, because you've got the time right now. So in our class, we say don't pull stringers, super dangerous, but sometimes you have to pull them in order to get the right profile for the piece you're working on. So I pulled that stringer to get a really nice taper to this. Another glimpse at it there. All right, and then we'll break it off with this last punty. Should just take a tiny tap. Yep. There we go. Polish the very tip of the loop where that punty was attached, making sure my tweezers don't get too hot. If they did, they would melt into the loop. Then you'd have to wear the loop and the tweezers, which looks pretty weird. So there again, you can see the finished piece. It's got that nice pink tint to it. That's from 24 karat gold. Yeah, it's got that nice swirled look. Pretty thin. So yeah, that's one of my signature pendants. One of the pink signatures. Now it goes into the kiln. It's about 1,000 degrees in there. And it'll sit there for the rest of the day, and I'll keep putting finished work in the kiln, and then we'll cool it over about 12 hours. I'll show you really quick the setups I've got for the other ones sitting here. So this will be a green signature. I don't know if you can quite see inside of there. It's pretty dark right now, but essentially, yeah, this is just scrap from another vortex that I was able to salvage, and so I'll just be able to make a nice signature pendant out of that section right there. So I've got 3 more of those in the kiln warming up to make those today. So you're welcome, Auntie Dante. Glad I could do that for you. Thanks everyone for watching. We appreciate your continued support. Keep supporting small businesses. Check out Facebook every day, obviously 10 a.m. for demos. We'll be releasing our new sale item today. We just slashed a bunch of prices on our clearance items, so check those out. I went through and made a bunch of cuts on those yesterday, so super discounted artwork in the clearance section. Gift certificates are a great way to just, kind of put that money in the Lake Superior Art Glass bank, if you will, for future purchases or classes or things like that. So you can purchase those right on the website. And yeah, if you like the video, make sure you like our page on Facebook, follow us on YouTube. We're going to keep adding these to YouTube and try to get kind of a good assortment of videos on our YouTube page as well. So like us, comment, share. If you have pendant ideas that you'd like to see me make for a custom pendant, check out the website. We've got a form on there you can fill out with all the details. And yeah, I think that's about it. So thanks again for watching, everyone. Have a great day, and we'll see you tomorrow at 10. Take care.